Did you know that the word Semite is Greek-derived, and the word Shemite, that is never used ever, is Hebrew-derived? Most don't know that. I find that kind of interesting. Like I would have thought that Hillman might have brought this up, but these guys are arguing about like which language came first, the Hebrew or the Greek. So my point, I guess you could say, is if it's so important for people to believe that the Old Testament was first written in Hebrew rather than Greek, which is what this guy deeply cares about, and what this guy this his whole life is that the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew was first. Well, if that's the case, then why use the Greek-derived word Semite rather than the proper Hebrew-derived word, which would be Shemite? Now, I've seen some comments. People have no idea who these guys even really are because we're not taught in our cultural Christianity that everyone knows in America, or if you actually go to church, neither in church or in cultural Christianity, which is kind of an oral tradition, do you ever hear the word Shemite? Never. Jesus was a Shemite. This is Luke 3. You can see the title of Luke 3. And this is Luke 3:21 is where the genealogy begins. So 21 to 37. So Jesus tells us who he came from. So Joseph, and Joseph goes back, you see Melchi, and then Shem. Jesus was a Shemite Jew. He was a Shemite Palestinian Jew according to the Bible. Most important is Palestinian Shemite, as you'll see. So what I will demonstrate in this video a little bit later in more detail, because I want to go through it a couple times with some different perspectives, so people can have a couple ways to look at this information, because for many it's going to be new and disturbing. Some will be, oh, that makes complete sense, and does make complete sense. So this is from that paper. And they've given us an image that shows, you can see the language. They're looking at genes. They're looking at single nucleotide polymorphisms, SNPs. So genetic markers. So here's what they've identified. These are the European Ashkenazi Gomerite Jews. These are the African Hamite Jews. These are the Palestinian true Shemite Jews. You can see what they said in groups are color-coded. Europe, light blue. Middle East, these are your non-Jews. Your light blue, I'll show you that a little bit later. And then your Ashkenazi Gomerite Jews, they're dark blue. So you can see they have the Jewish there, Jewish here, but not here. So you can see totally different people, right? So you can be an Ashkenazi Gomerite or a regular Gomerite, not Ashkenaz, and be Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Jewish, doesn't make any difference. Hamites can be anything they want to be. See, we're talking about ethnic groups here. I don't know how it is that the believers in America and the conspiracy theorists in America haven't figured out that this has nothing to do with religion. It's all about, it's an ethnicity issue. So here we can see from the Bible Hub the word Sem, which is of course Shem, Sem. I'm not sure with this accent over the eta, if the sigma eta mu becomes Shem or not. I don't know. But we know how it's spelled, and we know the word Semite versus Shemite. Hebrew origin is Shem. So Semite was actually invented in Germany. Isn't that incredible? Semite was a word invented by Gomerites in about 1800. We'll just call it 1800. 1800 is when the Gomerites, you can say late 18th century. So the first use of the word Semite, where? German historian Ludwig von Schlosser is credited for introducing the term in the modern lexicon. Isn't that amazing? Did you know that? Did you know that Gomer created the word Semite to refer to Shemites? Interesting. So interesting to moi. So let's look at, this is Noah Webster, different from Merriam. I'm not sure if they're related long distance wise, but whatever. But Noah Webster had the American Dictionary of the English Language. It was 1828. if you put in the word Shem, you get nothing. If you put in the word Shemite, you get nothing. You have to put the word Shemitic. And then we are told, what does Shemitic mean? Pertaining to Shem. When you put in Semitic or Semite, you get nothing. Do you mean Semitarian? Do you mean Semitic? So you can see the words Semite, Semitic did not exist in the English language. I had to change this until 1828, not 1928, 1828. The word Semite was first introduced circa 1800 in Gomerite Germany. Isn't that just amazing how this works out? So who are the people we're talking about? We're talking about Jesus is of the Shem line. Here's Jesus, Iasus. And there he is here, showing us who the Shems are. The Shems came from the Shem line. They're Shemites. They're not Semites. This is where people say the word Hebrew came from Eber. But here's Abraham. So you got the Shemites who are going to be attacked by the Gomerites in Ezekiel 38. So who are the Gomerites? Well, they came from Japheth. Now, Japheth has many sons. The big players in 38 are these guys here, Meshech, Tubal, Togar, Ma, and then Magog, and then Gog, a player, is a dude, the prince of Magog. So these five here, I should say these five here. That's really sloppy. Sorry. So Magog, Meshech, Tubal, Togar, Ma, and Gomer are the ones that enter Palestine and wipe out the Shemites. And that's why they're told, head for the hills, baby. Flee to the mountains, says Jesus. Jerusalem, and of course we know go back far, Jerusalem could be greater Jerusalem, not just like the little town. So Gaza counts as Jerusalem in terms of greater Jerusalem during the Crusade days. Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Well, Gomer is a Gentile. The British royals are pure Gomer. They are the Gomerites. Here's Matthew 14. When the abomination of desolation that rolls in, flee to the mountains. Flee to the mountains. Desolation is coming. Now, nowhere in the Bible are we told about Gomer doing anything else but destroying Palestine. That's Gomer's function. So the book was written from the perspective of Shemites in the Middle East who are going to be invaded and dominated by the Gentiles. And that's been happening since the Crusades, since 1,000 years when they invaded. Isn't that amazing? So you go to Amazing Bible Timeline, sons of Japheth. Japheth had 7 sons. Gomer was the oldest. Gomer's the oldest. Gomer is a warlike supporter from the north and a chief of Chief Gog and Magog, right? So the Gog is in charge and Gomer is one of his dudes. But in our scenario, I mean, come on, the Bible's made up anyway. But isn't it bizarre that Gomer actually did this? The only place in the Bible that we hear about Gomer doing anything is when it desolates Jerusalem, when it desolates Palestine. And that's what the Gomerites of America and Europe have done in the name of being Semites, which of course they are not. So here's Japheth. And you can see underlined in red the 5 sons that will be involved in Ezekiel 38, as you can see right here. Ezekiel 38. Here is Ashkenaz. So you've got your Ashkenazi Gomerites that refer to themselves as Semites, but they're Gomerites. They're not from Sem. Here's Ashkenaz. Here's Gomer. And here is Shem down here. So this is Shem, Japheth, Europe, Japheth. But this is the Bible account. They didn't have details about what Norway was going to be like back in the Bible days. So here we can see, and here's Ham. Ham, Shem, Japheth. That's the Bible lineup. Now, interestingly, I just showed you that the Ashkenazi Gomerite Jews, they have a unique genetic pattern that is different from the Palestinian Shemite Jews, right? They're very different, as are the Hamites. So we're going to go back to when it was 1915. In 1915, now here you can see Japheth in green, but this is just the Japheth Turks. These are the Japheth Turks in 1915. They own the land of Shem. Remember, Shem is the Arabian Peninsula, from Palestine out the Arabian Peninsula, that's Shem. You can look at it. If you want to go back up, you can look at it. You'll see it's all over the place. This is very well-known information that no one thinks about it because we're not told to think about it. See, that's kind of a problem. So the Japhethite Turks are in green, and they controlled all of this land. So in 1915, a representative for King George named Colonel MacMahon dealt with the Sharif of Mecca, and said, if you take out the Turks, you can have all your land back. They're like, no problem, no problem. I put this up here too, because this takeover of the Middle East took place right when British Gomer was. Now look at how these guys look like twin brothers, or they could be twin brothers, first cousins. And this, of course, is George's other first cousin. So George, you have to think about these disgusting elitist Gomerites. King George's two first cousins were murdered in 1917 after King George denied their request for asylum in England. So if these disgusting royal Gomerites will sacrifice their first cousins, let them be murdered, horrifically, brutally murdered and destroyed, right? Do you think they give a shit about local little brown people over here? These are little brown people, nothing. These are royal blood that these scumbags are happy to sacrifice. No problem, for power and money, right? That's how they operate, baby. So the Shemites took out the Japhethite Turks in the war, and they were told that they were going to get this. But then what did Gomer England do? Well, we know what Gomer England did. They did Sykes-Picot. Gog and Magog begins, in the superstitious scenario, the Agrigor version of it, during the 1916 swindle of the Shem land by the Gomerites. So this is when the British crown, Gomer, takes over Shemite Palestine and Iraq. Up top here was given to the French, also Gomerites. So this is 1916. These guys hadn't been murdered yet. So you can see what's going on here. They're taking over land. They don't want the Russian or the Germans to get control of the oil, most likely, because oil was discovered in 1908 out here. Oil was discovered out here in 1908, wherever Afghanistan is. Iran, Persia. Okay, so that was 1916. The swindle happened. And then, of course, which means that they initiated Ezekiel 38 in 1916. The only time we ever see anywhere, in any book anywhere, where Britain is going to invade Palestine, the only book that tells us this is the Bible. It's such a bizarre deal, isn't it? We're definitely in some type of interesting simulation of some sort. I think a very, 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 very sophisticated mathematical construct that's unbelievably scientifically designed. I mean, unfucking-believably scientifically designed. So then it eventually became the Gomer land that we know what it is today. And of course, the bombing goes on. So this has been going on now for these people for how many years? Since 1916, which means for almost 110 years, they've been going through a World War I state in the land of Shem, being taken out repeatedly and murdered by the Japhethite Gomerites. Disgusting. Who are happy to murder their own royal bloodline, as I said before, if they're okay to literally their own royal bloodline. And I mean, he looks like George. Kill him, no problem, as long as we get the land, the oil, the cash, whatever else. These guys are scumbags. Ruthless scumbags, all of them. So this is the reality that we live in terms of the Bible. We've got Europe, we've got the Middle East, and we've got Africa. Europe has bombed Africa. Europe has bombed the Middle East. Europe in the Bible is Gomer, Japheth. Middle East is Shem, Sem-ite, true Shemite, and then we've got our Hamite. This is the reality. Now this is the myth. This is the agrigor that the average American falls for, as you're going to see. So here comes the mesmerizing. Look what I did first. Focus on Shem right here. Look at Shem. Sorry. Look what happens. They're not Shem. They're not Shemites. They're Arabs. They're evil Muslims. That's what we're told. They're just Arabs. They're just Arabs. Well, who are the people up north? Well, we're not told that they're Japheth and Gomer. We're told that these people up north. So you see right just popped there. The fairy tale believed by Gomerite Christians and conspiracy theorists is what? That the Shemites in the Middle East are actually Arabs that for some reason don't belong there, although they're Shemites. Arabs are all Shemites. Palestinians are Shemites. If you live in the desert of Arizona, you're basically an Arab because Arab, bottom line, Arab means those who live in the desert. Okay, so the fiction is that these guys are Arabs. This is the lie. And then what else are we told to like polish off the whole mesmerizing bullshit fest? We are told that Europe is where the true Christians and Semites are, and in the Middle East is where the evil Arabs are. So they got the war against the Judeo-Christians in Europe versus the Muslims in the Middle East, which is bullshit. This is Europe invading the Middle East and Africa. If we use biblical language, it is Japheth and Gomer invading Shem and Ham. Very straightforward. And look at how interesting this is. The Shemites or the Semites and the Christians, really the Christians are big pushers, right? They claim the Bible as their own, even though the Bible was written in the land of Shem, where the Bible tells us that the enemies are going to be the Gomerites that invade from the north. But the mesmerizing process involves these Arabs having nothing to do with the Bible, even though the Bible was written by them, the Shemites, because they're all Arabs down there. And we're told that they're just radical Islams. That's what, right? Isn't that just what we're told? This is the difference. You got Christianity and Judaism versus Islam. Pure bullshit. Pure, absolute bullshit. You're talking about Japheth and Gomer versus Shem, and they already took out Ham. Libya was a brutal Ham takedown. Okay, so what do we know about the Hamites, right? I mean, Americans will probably just think, well, they're just all either heathens or Arabs or Muslims, and be very pejorative in their language toward them, very critical. So let's look at some of the Hamites, because people think that the Hamites just must be Muslim, right? Not true. Hamite Ethiopian Jews, Hamite Ethiopian Christians. Ethiopia, one of the oldest Christian nations in the world, and they embraced the Bible and Christianity before Europe. Look at this, Ethiopian Jews. So you see, Ethiopia, there would be their genetics of Ethiopia, because they're all, they're there. They're a little different than, here, look, the Ethiopians look different than than the Africans who live in the Congo, right? They're different genetic groups. So if you look at this guy here, he's got the more narrow nose, the more, and this guy here as well. This is a more Caucasoid nose versus the broader, wider Negroid nose. It was hot as shit in the Congo, right? So hotter than here. So presumably that's part of the reason why. So the point is, you have Hamites who can be Jew, Christian, or Muslim. It's amazing in America that the Christians in particular and the stupid conspiracy theorists don't get this. So this is the situation that we are in. This is the fiction that exists. This is the reality that exists. This is the reality. Now we're going to lay over it the genetics to further demonstrate that this actually shockingly is accurate. You got Europe, we're going to call Japheth. The Bible says Europe is Japheth. Now, what about Vietnam? Not in play here. We're talking Bible. Europe is Japheth, Gomer. Middle East, Shem. Africa is Ham. That's what the Bible tells us. So it turns out that genes line up perfectly. I showed you this before. So here I mentioned before, these are the Ashkenazi Gomerite Jews. These are the Hamite Jews. And these are the Palestinian Shemite Jews in red. You got some Gomer in there. You got some Ashkenaz in there because they live there, right? And there's, of course, after 1,000 years or however long it's been, they've intermarried. This one here, these are Yemeni Jews. Look how different they are. These are non-Jews, the light green. You can see light green, just Middle East in general, broadly Middle East. These are specific groupings of your Jewish population that have stuck together. You can see, there are. There's everywhere you go, you got Jews. in America, we think that the only Jews are the German Jews, the Ashkenaz. It's really amazing. Really amazing. And the German Jews are not even remotely Semites or Shemites. They're Gomerites. So this is European non-Ashkenaz. This is European Ashkenaz Jews. This is European. So this would be Japhethite non-Jews, Japhethite Jews, Ham Jews, Shemite Jews. That's what this is telling us. We're going to blow it up here. We can see again. These are the Ashkenazi Gomerite Jews. These are your Hamite Jews. These are your Palestinian Shemite Jews. And you can see I color-coded it right here as well. So it's really straightforward, very clear. We're going to lay it over this map. So I popped in here. Up top, Japheth has the Ashkenazi Jews. Shem has the Mizrahi, Palestinian true Shemite Jews. And you got your Hamite Jews. This is how the scientists look at it because we know that they're ethnically different, even though they have the same religion, even though it's slightly different probably in how they practice it from region to region. But this is what we're told. And it lines up exactly with the Bible. It's really kind of amazing. That's why this is kind of like, sort of like simulation-ish, kind of weird for it to be like this. So we're going to lay it over what I just showed you, right? Here are your Ashkenaz. Here are your Hams. And here are your Mizrahi. Mizrahi was the Middle Eastern Jew. It just means Palestinian Shemite Jew is what you should think right here because they're the locals. And there you go. You can see they're totally different. Same religion, but completely different gene pools. I mean, not completely, but very different, obviously. So we're going to take the blue Ashkenaz, right? We're going to take the blue, the orange. We're going to take out the big picture and drop these guys down here so we can see. So here we are. So you can see totally different ethnicities. Completely different ethnicities, same exact religion. Now, it's really important because in this same article that gave us this excellent information about the single nucleotide polymorphisms, the SNPs, we're told this, Mizrahi Jew samples. Now, Mizrahi means Shemite. Shemite Jews. Shemite Jews can be distinguished from Ashkenazi Jews, Gomer Jews, Ham Jews. Now, this is the most important thing. So, let me read this to you. So, Mizrahi Shemite Jewish samples can be distinguished from Gomer, Ham, and Spanish Jews, with most Mizrahi samples, clustering among Middle Eastern non-Jewish samples. So, clustering among other Middle Eastern non-Jewish samples. So, we know that the Mizrahi Jews are Middle Eastern. Some are Jew, some are Ham, some are Christian, and most are Muslim. That's all this means. The Shem is the ethnicity, which is really Mizrahi, Middle Eastern, but Shem in terms of the Bible language. So it's very, very clear, very, very obvious. It should be so clear how the scenario operates. And then we know this happened. So we should see very, very clearly who the true Shemites are. And we should know that the word Semite is a fabricated term that has nothing to do with the Bible or the original inhabitants of the land of Shem. Now, if you're Japheth, Ashkenaz, Gomerite, or just Japheth, Gomerite, you can be any one of these religions. The Ashkenaz are Jewish, and they cluster together, just like the Mizrahi Shems. They cluster together, just like the Hams. They cluster together. It's the same way all over the world. It's not just European Jews living together, hanging out together. Same as like you go to Brooklyn, you got the Jewish section, you got the Italian section, right? Little Italy, right? All that stuff. That's all this is. And then the religions are taken on after that. Now let's just say we're talking about, we go to India. Now India, what do you think that the Indians are Hindu genes? To actually think that there's a Jewish gene, you got to be so stupid to think that. No offense if you thought that, but now you shouldn't think that, right? It should be very obvious, and it should have been very obvious from all along because The Europeans look different from the Middle Easterners, who look different from the Africans. Okay, so we're going to India now. On the top right, you can see these are Indians. These are not Middle Easterners. These are Indians. They're not Hindus, they're Jews. These are Indians, their ethnicity. Now I realize that it's a conglomeration, but the Indians look different. It's interesting. You can find some Indians who have this appearance here, who have skin as black as the blackest skin that you'll find in the Congo. It's amazing. You can have extremely light-skinned Caucasoid Indians. You can have very, very dark coal-colored Caucasoid Indians, just dark skin, versus the Negroid Africans, Negroid referring to the broader Neris. The different, not a pejorative, it's not even nothing racial, it's just a differentiation of what people look like. So the Indians, most common is Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikh, Islam is big. You can be a Muslim, Judaism, I should put Islam there. Christianity, the St. Thomas Christians are the biggest down in Kerala. It's the southwestern tip of towards the southwestern tip of the Indian Peninsula as it goes out into the Indian Ocean. So there you go. There's no such thing as ethnic Hindu. The same ethnic Hindus can be any religion that they choose to be. Only moron religiosity people in the West and their idiotic conspiracy theory promoters believe that religion has something to do with genetics. It's amazing. So here are the Mizrahi Jews. This, you can see My Jewish Learning. This is, I think it's an Israeli publication. Jews have a separate heritage. Exactly. Meaning different genes, baby. Jews from the Middle East, ancestry, forever, late antiquity. Now they say the oldest, Iraq, Persia, Yemen, but of course, Palestine too, of course. So now let's look at this dude here. This is a Japhethite. He's tan. You can see right here, light hair. He's a blonde dude, right? Blonde dude, light eyes, tan. Look, same skin color. Why? Because in the Middle East sun, all tanned out. So you can see ethnically, this is a Japhethite, and this is a truly stereotypical looking Shemite, right? See the Shemite look, brown-skinned Shemites, paler-skinned Japhethites. Notice also they are Caucasoid looking. They've got the narrow nose and narrow features. So these are your Middle Eastern, your ethnic Middle Eastern Jews from antiquity. If this would be the lineage the Bible would have been about, and they're told that from the north the Gomerites will invade, which is what has happened. Here's Jesus telling us. These Shemite Jews look identical to Shemite Muslims and Shemite Christians. That's exactly right. Now, Jesus, of course, doesn't look like them because he looks Italian, right? Because that's because of Roman Catholicism. You think that, I mean, how many brutally, I mean, you're truly stereotypical right-wing evangelical, maybe not evangelical, but right-wing racist. This would have been the skin color of Jesus, brown dude. Yeah, so it's really weird, right? Anyway, so Jesus doesn't look like, I mean, the real Jesus, if he ever existed, would have looked like one of these guys. He is a Shemite, a brown-skinned Shemite from the Middle East, and back then there was no Jew, Christian or Islam. There was just the Bible and the other stuff that was around. So here's a scenario. Jesus is a Shemite. This is what a Shemite boy looks like. This is what a Shemite man looks like. This is what a Gomerite looks like. So you got Japhethite Gomerites in the royal Brits, and then you've got your Shemites. Now we know if the royal family will murder their own bloodline, there's no problem absolutely desolating a land that does not belong to you, which is what has happened. So you can clearly see this. What is happening here is stunningly the only time in history where there's been this level of absolute desolation in Palestine. No time else in history, except maybe if you go back to the Crusades. This is the modern scenario that we have. And who's doing the damaging, the desolating? The Gomerites, the Gentiles, just like we're told in Luke 21 by Jesus when he said that Jerusalem, Palestine, Greater Jerusalem, will be trampled upon by the Gentiles, which is what the Gomerites are, until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled.